Life in the city had always been chaotic, but for Amelia Carter, it was predictable chaos. A graphic designer in her mid-20s, she never thought she'd leave the bustle of urban life until a devastating breakup left her seeking solace in the small mountain town of Moonridge. Nestled at the edge of an expansive forest, the town seemed like the perfect place for a fresh start. Amelia had always been drawn to the quiet majesty of the wilderness. What she didn't expect was to be drawn into a world she never knew existed, a world of werewolves, ancient pack politics, and a love so intense it would challenge everything she believed about herself. Her first encounter with Ethan Blackwell, the town's reclusive and brooding alpha, is electric. Tall, dark, and exuding an aura of raw power, Ethan seems to have stepped straight out of a fantasy. But their connection is more than just attraction. There's a primal pull between them, one that feels as if it's been written in the stars, or perhaps etched into the moon's cycles. Ethan, however, is bound by duty and burdened by the weight of his role as alpha. Protecting his pack from internal and external threats leaves little room for personal desires. Yet, he can't deny the fire that Amelia ignites within him. As Amelia begins to uncover the secrets of Moonridge and its inhabitants, she finds herself caught between the human world she's always known and the wild, dangerous world Ethan inhabits. When a rival pack threatens the region's fragile peace, Amelia is thrust into a fight for survival, love, and belonging. Me and My Alpha is a story of passion and destiny, where a young woman and a powerful alpha must navigate their differences, fight for their bond, and protect the fragile harmony between their worlds. Together, they must face danger, betrayal, and the undeniable truth that love can bridge even the wildest divides. Chapter 1. New Beginnings in Moonridge. Amelia Carter adjusted her rearview mirror and sighed, the final stretch of her drive weaving through a winding road flanked by towering pines. The scent of the forest, earthy and clean, seeped into her car as she cracked the window. Moonridge, her destination, was still a few miles away, but the stillness of the wilderness had already begun to seep into her, quieting the restless thoughts that had plagued her since the breakup. After 8 years in the city, her life had felt like an overplayed song, familiar and comfortable, but draining in its monotony. And when the breakup with Lucas left her not just single but questioning the trajectory of her entire existence, the idea of a fresh start in a small mountain town had been as enticing as a dream. She rounded another curve, and the town finally came into view. Nestled in a valley, Moonridge was quaint yet striking, the kind of place that looked as though it had stepped out of a postcard. Timber-framed storefronts lined the main street, with hanging flower baskets spilling bright colors onto the sidewalks. The backdrop was a lush forest that seemed endless, its emerald expanse kissed by the late afternoon sun. Amelia pulled into the driveway of her new rental cabin, a cozy A-frame nestled at the edge of the woods. The real estate agent had sold it as charming and rustic, and as Amelia stepped out of the car, she found it to be exactly that. The structure was quaint but sturdy, its wooden beams softened by a sprawling ivy that crept along the sides. She popped the trunk, grabbing the first of her boxes. Inside, the cabin was warm and inviting, with exposed wood beams and a stone fireplace dominating the living room. Large windows offered a breathtaking view of the forest, sunlight streaming through the trees and casting patterns across the floor. "Perfect," she murmured, setting her box of books on the coffee table. The silence was refreshing but also a little unnerving. In the city, there had always been a hum of life. Cars, people, music spilling from open windows. Here, the only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant chirp of birds. As she unpacked, the shadows outside lengthened. By the time she took a break and stepped onto the back porch with a cup of tea, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The forest loomed close, its edge just beyond the small backyard. There was something captivating about it, as though it held secrets waiting to be discovered. Amelia sipped her tea, letting the tranquility settle into her bones. A sudden rustle in the underbrush snapped her out of her thoughts. Her gaze darted to the forest, her heart leaping into her throat. "Probably just a deer," she muttered, though the logic did little to steady her nerves. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The sensation was subtle but persistent, like an itch at the back of her mind. She squinted into the trees but saw nothing, just shadows deepening as night took hold. With a shiver, she went back inside, locking the door behind her. She laughed softly at herself. "Get a grip, Amelia. It's just your imagination." But her imagination didn't explain the golden eyes that glimmered briefly in the darkness of the woods, watching as she disappeared into the cabin. Far deeper in the forest, Ethan Blackwell stood motionless beneath the canopy of ancient trees. His heightened senses tracked her every move, the way she had lingered on the porch, staring into the forest as if searching for something. His wolf stirred within him, restless and intrigued. The scent of the newcomer still clung to the air, and it was unlike anything he had encountered before. Sweet and warm, with a hint of something wild, it tugged at him in ways he didn't fully understand. "She's just a human," he muttered to himself, though the words rang hollow. As alpha of the Moonridge Pack, Ethan was no stranger to outsiders moving to the town. Most came and went without disturbing the delicate balance of his world. But this one, Amelia, felt different. Her presence was an anomaly, one his instincts told him to investigate. Yet, a part of him, a part that he didn't want to name, warned him to keep his distance. The wolf inside him had other ideas. Back in the cabin, Amelia climbed into bed, exhaustion pulling at her eyelids. The day had been long, but she felt lighter than she had in weeks, her heart lifting at the promise of a new beginning. Sleep came easily, but her dreams were anything but peaceful. She was running through the forest, the ground damp beneath her bare feet. Moonlight illuminated the trees, turning the world silver. A howl pierced the air, and she stopped, spinning to face the source of the sound. Golden eyes stared back at her, glowing in the darkness. Amelia woke with a start, her heart pounding. The cabin was silent, but the dream lingered, vivid and unsettling. She glanced toward the window, half expecting to see those eyes staring back at her. But there was nothing there. Only the forest, quiet and still, holding its secrets close. "Welcome to Moonridge," Amelia thought as she tried to calm her racing heart. Little did she know, her arrival marked the beginning of something she could never have anticipated. Chapter 2: The Alpha's Warning. Amelia awoke to a cool breeze drifting through the open window, carrying the faint scent of pine and dew with it. The dream from the previous night lingered in her mind, vivid and unsettling. The golden eyes had felt so real and full of intent, as if they had pierced into her soul. She shook her head, trying to push the memory aside as she climbed out of bed. After a quick breakfast, she decided to take a walk into town. Her cabin sat on the outskirts of Moonridge, and the main road leading into town wound through a picturesque landscape of rolling hills and tall, ancient trees. The fresh mountain air invigorated her, and for the first time in months, she felt a spark of excitement. The town itself was even more charming in daylight. Locals strolled along the sidewalks, chatting with one another or sipping coffee at small outdoor tables. A bell jingled as she stepped into a local cafe, its warm, inviting atmosphere a welcome change from the anonymity of the city. "Morning," a cheerful barista greeted her. "You must be new in town. I'm Jenna. What can I get for you?" Amelia smiled. "Hi, Jenna. Just a coffee, thanks. Black." As Jenna poured the steaming cup, Amelia glanced around. The cafe was cozy, with mismatched furniture and shelves lined with books and trinkets. A bulletin board near the counter caught her eye, cluttered with flyers for local events, missing pet notices, and a handwritten invitation to the town's annual full moon bonfire. "You should come to the bonfire," Jenna said, noticing where Amelia's gaze had landed. "It's kind of a big deal around here. Great way to meet people." "Sounds fun," Amelia replied, though her curiosity was piqued. "What's the occasion?" Jenna shrugged, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "Tradition. Some say it's to honor the town's history. Others just like the excuse to drink cider and tell ghost stories." Amelia laughed, feeling a bit more at ease. She thanked Jenna for the coffee and made her way back outside, the warmth of the cup seeping into her hands. As she wandered through town, her mind kept drifting back to the forest. Something about it called to her, tugging at the edges of her thoughts. The dream still haunted her, though she couldn't explain why. It was just a dream, after all, wasn't it? Lost in her musings, she didn't notice the man standing in her path until she nearly bumped into him. "Careful there," he said, his voice deep and commanding. Amelia looked up, and her breath caught. The man before her was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and striking features. His eyes, a piercing shade of green, seemed to see straight through her. There was an intensity about him, a quiet power that made her feel both intrigued and uneasy. "I'm sorry," she said, stepping back. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You're the one who moved into the cabin near the woods." It wasn't a question. "Yes," she replied, surprised. "I just got here yesterday." "How did you—" "Small town," he interrupted. "People notice things." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, he said, "You should be careful out there. The woods can be dangerous, especially for someone new." Amelia frowned, bristling at the subtle condescension in his tone. "I think I can handle myself, thanks." His lips quirked in what might have been a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I mean it. Stay on the main trails. Don't wander too far, especially at night." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of the street, her heart pounding. Later that afternoon, Amelia couldn't shake the encounter from her mind. The man's warning, cryptic as it was, had unsettled her. Who was he? And why had he seemed so concerned about her safety? Determined to shake off the strange interaction, she decided to explore the area around her cabin. With a sturdy pair of hiking boots and a water bottle in hand, she set out into the woods. The forest was breathtaking, a tapestry of greens and browns bathed in dappled sunlight. Birds chirped overhead, and the scent of earth and pine was intoxicating. Amelia followed a well-worn path, letting her thoughts drift as she marveled at the beauty around her. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, the atmosphere shifted. The forest seemed darker, the trees more imposing. The cheerful birdsong faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. Amelia hesitated, a prickling sensation crawling up her spine. The feeling from last night returned, the sense that she was being watched. She turned in a slow circle, scanning the shadows, but saw nothing. "Hello," she called, her voice barely louder than a whisper. The only response was the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Shaking her head, she scolded herself for being paranoid and started back toward the cabin. But she couldn't ignore the feeling that something, or someone, was following her. Ethan watched her from the cover of the trees, his wolf pacing restlessly beneath his skin. He had tried to keep his distance, but the pull toward her was maddening. The moment he'd caught her scent in town, he had known she was near. It was sweet and warm, tinged with something wild and familiar. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay hidden. She had no idea what kind of danger she was in, no idea that her mere presence was already disrupting the fragile balance he had fought so hard to maintain. "She doesn't belong here," he muttered to himself, though the words felt hollow. Yet, as he watched her retreat toward her cabin, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that fate had other plans. Chapter 3: Secrets Beneath the Pines. The days that followed were a blend of curiosity and unease for Amelia. Moonridge was undeniably beautiful, but the strange encounter with the mysterious man, Ethan Blackwell, as she later learned from Jenna, lingered in her mind. His warning about the forest echoed in her thoughts, especially when she was staring at the dense line of trees behind her cabin. Despite his cryptic words, she couldn't bring herself to stay away. The woods had a magnetic pull, drawing her deeper into their shadowy depths. Each step felt like peeling back a layer of mystery, as though the trees themselves whispered secrets she wasn't meant to hear. Late one afternoon, Amelia ventured farther into the forest than before. With a sturdy backpack and a sense of determination, she followed a narrow path that twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the heart of the wilderness. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustle of leaves, the chirp of crickets, the occasional crack of a branch underfoot. Yet, beneath the natural symphony, something else was a subtle tension that made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. She paused by a small clearing, sunlight streaming through the canopy above. Taking a deep breath, she let the tranquility of the moment wash over her. It was easy to forget her worries here, surrounded by nature's raw beauty. But the peace was short-lived. A low growl rumbled through the air, so soft it could have been mistaken for the wind. Amelia froze, her heart pounding as she scanned the shadows. The growl came again, closer this time, and unmistakably animal. Her pulse quickened. She turned slowly, her eyes darting between the trees, searching for the source. A glint of movement caught her attention, a flash of silver fur disappearing behind a tree. "Okay, time to go," she whispered, trying to steady her breathing. She retraced her steps as quickly and quietly as she could, her senses on high alert. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sent her heart racing. It wasn't until she reached the edge of the forest that she dared to glance back. The woods were silent. Still. Amelia shook her head, trying to calm the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Maybe it had just been her imagination, or a large animal passing through. Either way, she resolved to be more cautious in the future. That evening, Amelia sat on her porch, a cup of tea warming her hands. The forest loomed before her, dark and mysterious, but she couldn't deny its allure. Her thoughts drifted to Ethan. There was something about him that unsettled her. It wasn't just his warning or his piercing green eyes. It was the way he seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. She had asked Jenna about him earlier, but the barista had been frustratingly vague. "He keeps to himself," Jenna had said with a shrug. "Owns some land near the woods. Runs a timber business. People say he's intense, but he's not a bad guy. Just private." Private was an understatement. Amelia couldn't help but feel there was more to Ethan than met the eye. As the evening deepened, her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden knock at the door. Startled, she set her cup down and crossed the room. When she opened the door, her breath caught. Ethan stood there, his tall frame filling the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a flicker of something she couldn't quite place. Concern, maybe, or frustration. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and firm. Amelia blinked, caught off guard. "About what?" He glanced over her shoulder toward the forest, his jaw tightening. "About the woods. And why you shouldn't go wandering around in them." She folded her arms, irritation flaring. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of handling myself." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. The forest isn't as safe as it seems. There are things out there that you're better off avoiding." "Like wolves?" she asked, her voice tinged with sarcasm. His expression darkened. Among other things, the intensity in his tone gave her pause. He wasn't just being overprotective, he genuinely believed what he was saying. Amelia hesitated, torn between frustration and curiosity. "Why does it matter to you anyway? I'm just another newcomer, right?" Ethan's gaze bore into hers, and for a moment, she thought he might walk away. Instead, he exhaled slowly, running a hand through his dark hair. "It matters," he said finally, his voice softer now. "Because I don't want to see you get hurt." The sincerity in his words took her by surprise. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. That night, Amelia's dreams were vivid and unsettling. She was running through the forest again, her bare feet pounding against the earth. Moonlight lit her path, but shadows danced at the edges of her vision. The growl came again, low and menacing, and she turned to see a massive wolf standing a few feet away. Its golden eyes locked onto hers, filled with a strange intelligence that sent a shiver down her spine. She woke with a start, her heart racing. The dream had felt so real, as though it were a memory rather than a figment of her imagination. Amelia stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning. The growls in the forest, Ethan's cryptic warnings, the golden eyes in her dreams. None of it made sense. Yet, Deep down, she knew there was a connection, a thread tying it all together. And she was determined to unravel it, no matter what secrets lay beneath the pines. Chapter 4. The Wolf in the Shadows. Amelia couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her after Ethan's visit. His warning played on a loop in her mind. There are things out there that you're better off avoiding. His words weren't just cautious. They were steeped in urgency, as though he was trying to protect her from something she couldn't comprehend. For the next few days, she stayed close to the cabin, resisting the pull of the woods. But the forest's quiet allure didn't fade. It was always there, humming in the background of her thoughts, tempting her to step beyond her self-imposed boundaries. By the fourth evening, her resolve crumbled. Armed with a flashlight and a sturdy pair of boots, Amelia decided to walk along the forest's edge. She promised herself she wouldn't go far, just enough to clear her mind and shake the growing restlessness in her chest. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and indigo as Amelia stepped into the trees. The air was cool and crisp, and the forest was alive with the sounds of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. She stuck to the narrow path that wove through the underbrush, careful to avoid straying too far. The deeper she ventured, the more the noise of the world faded. The quiet became almost oppressive, the kind of silence that pressed against her ears and made her hyper-aware of her own breathing. As she walked, something in the distance caught her attention. A faint glow, flickering like firelight, filtered through the trees. Curiosity stirred within her, and she found herself moving toward it despite the knot of apprehension in her stomach. The source of the light was a small clearing where a makeshift fire crackled in a ring of stones. Around it sat 3 men, their postures casual, but their expressions tense. Amelia froze, crouching behind a tree to avoid being seen. She knew she shouldn't be spying, but there was something unsettling about the group. Their conversation, carried on the wind, was hushed but heated. "Been getting too close," one of them muttered, his voice low and gruff. "We've told him to stay out of our territory," another replied. "If he doesn't back off, it's his funeral." Amelia's stomach churned. They weren't talking about her, were they? Before she could hear more, a sharp crack sounded beneath her foot. She looked down in horror at the snapped twig beneath her boot. The men's heads whipped around, their eyes narrowing as they scanned the trees. "Who's there?" one of them barked, rising to his feet. Panic surged through her, and she turned to run. Her heart pounded as she sprinted through the woods, her flashlight bouncing wildly with each step. She could hear them behind her, their footsteps crashing through the underbrush. But then something else joined the chase. A growl, low, guttural, and far more menacing than any human voice. Amelia didn't dare look back. She pushed herself harder, her lungs burning as she stumbled over roots and rocks. The growl grew louder, closer, until it seemed to surround her. Suddenly, a massive shape leapt from the shadows, landing between her and her pursuers. Amelia skidded to a halt, her breath catching in her throat. It was a wolf, but it was unlike any wolf she'd ever seen. It stood taller than any animal should, its silver gray fur glinting in the moonlight. Its golden eyes locked onto hers for a brief, heart-stopping moment before it turned its attention to the men. The growl that erupted from its throat was feral, primal, and utterly terrifying. The men froze, their expressions shifting from anger to fear. One of them took a step back, his hands raised. "Easy," he said, his voice trembling. "We're leaving." The wolf bared its teeth, a low snarl rumbling through the clearing. The men didn't need further convincing. They turned and bolted, their retreating figures swallowed by the darkness. Amelia stood rooted to the spot, her entire body trembling. The wolf turned back to her, its golden eyes softening as they met hers. For a moment, neither of them moved. Amelia's fear was tempered by a strange sense of familiarity, as though she'd seen those eyes before, perhaps in a dream. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the wolf darted into the shadows and disappeared. By the time Amelia made it back to her cabin, her legs were shaking, and her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. She locked the door behind her and sank onto the couch, trying to make sense of what had just happened. A wolf had saved her. Not just any wolf, a massive, otherworldly creature with eyes that seemed almost human. She thought of Ethan and his warnings. There are things out there that you're better off avoiding. What had she stumbled into? And what did it have to do with him? As the hours dragged on, Amelia couldn't stop replaying the events in her mind. Her fear was slowly being overshadowed by a burning need to understand. She didn't know what was going on in Moonridge, but one thing was clear: the forest was keeping secrets. And so was Ethan Blackwell. Chapter 5: Dreams of Golden Eyes. Amelia woke to a pounding headache and a sense of disorientation. Sunlight streamed through her cabin windows, too bright and too invasive after the events of the night before. She groaned as she sat up, the memory of her frantic escape through the woods rushing back in vivid detail. The men by the fire, the chase, and then the wolf with its piercing golden eyes. She rubbed her temples, trying to make sense of it. The rational part of her brain insisted she had been lucky, a freak encounter with a protective animal. But the part of her still remembered the intelligence in that wolf's eyes whispered that there was more to the story. Amelia reached for her phone, intending to call Jenna or anyone who could provide some clarity, but she stopped herself. What would she even say? "Hi, I think a giant, magical wolf saved me last night." No, she needed answers, not pitying looks and dismissive reassurances. There was only one person she knew who might have answers. The Blackwell Timber Office was a modest building near the edge of town, its cedar siding and green roof blending seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. Amelia hesitated outside, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She wasn't sure what she was hoping to find here, or what she was going to say to Ethan. Before she could lose her nerve, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The receptionist glanced up from her desk, her warm smile faltering slightly when she saw Amelia. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Ethan Blackwell," Amelia said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The receptionist's expression turned wary. "Mr. Blackwell doesn't usually take visitors without an appointment." "It's important," Amelia pressed. "Please, can you let him know I'm here?" The woman hesitated, then picked up the phone and murmured something Amelia couldn't hear. After a moment, she hung up and said, "He'll see you. Office at the end of the hall." Amelia muttered a thank you and made her way down the corridor. Her heartbeat quickened with every step, and by the time she reached Ethan's door, her palms were damp with sweat. She knocked lightly, and his deep voice called from within. "Come in." Amelia pushed the door open and stepped inside. Ethan sat behind a large wooden desk, his dark hair slightly disheveled and his piercing green eyes focused intently on her. "Amelia," he said, his tone a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "What are you doing here?" She closed the door behind her and crossed her arms. "I need answers." Ethan raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair. "About what?" "The forest. The wolf. You." His expression hardened, and for a moment, Amelia thought he might order her to leave. Instead, he stood and walked to the window, staring out at the tree line in the distance. "What happened last night?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. Amelia hesitated, then told him everything: the men around the fire, the chase, and the wolf that had saved her. She left nothing out, watching his reaction closely as she spoke. Ethan's jaw tightened, and when she finished, he turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have been out there," he said finally. "That's not an answer," she shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. "You knew something like this could happen, didn't you? That's why you warned me. What's going on in Moonridge? And why do I feel like everyone's keeping secrets from me?" Ethan studied her for a long moment, as if weighing his options. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You don't belong in the middle of this, Amelia. It's dangerous." "Maybe I don't," she said, stepping closer. "But I'm here now, and I deserve to know the truth." Ethan's eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite identify: hesitation, perhaps, or regret. Finally, he said, "The men you saw in the woods are from a rival pack." "Pack?" Amelia repeated, her stomach twisting. Ethan nodded. "My family has lived in Moonridge for generations. We're different. and we've managed to keep things peaceful for a long time. But there are others, like the ones you saw, who don't respect those boundaries." She frowned, trying to process his words. Different how? For a moment, Ethan seemed to struggle with his answer. Then he stepped closer, his green eyes meeting hers. "You've heard the stories about wolves in these woods, haven't you? People think they're just animals. But they're wrong. We're more than that. We're shifters, Amelia, werewolves." Amelia stared at him, her mind reeling. She wanted to laugh, to dismiss his words as absurd. But the memory of the golden-eyed wolf flashed in her mind, and something clicked into place. "You're serious," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "The wolf that saved you, it was one of us." "It was me?" Her breath caught, and she stumbled back a step. "You're trying to tell me that you're a werewolf? That you turned into a giant wolf and—" "Yes," Ethan said, cutting her off. "I didn't want you to know. I tried to keep my distance, to keep you safe. But now you've seen too much. You're part of this, whether you want to be or not." Amelia sank into the chair by his desk, her mind spinning. Everything she thought she knew about the world, about herself, felt suddenly fragile. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan hesitated, then said, "I don't know yet. But I can feel it. There's something about you, Amelia. Something that ties you to all of this. And whatever it is, it's powerful." The weight of his words settled over her, heavy and unrelenting. Amelia had come to Moonridge seeking a fresh start, a chance to rebuild her life. Instead, she had stumbled into a world of secrets, danger, and impossible truths. She looked up at Ethan, her heart pounding. "What happens now?" Ethan's expression softened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "Now," he said, "we figure this out together." Chapter 6: A Heart Torn Between Worlds. Amelia left Ethan's office with her thoughts spinning and her heart racing. The revelation that he was a werewolf, or a shifter, as he'd called it, was almost too much to process. Yet, deep down, she couldn't deny that it made a strange sense. The golden-eyed wolf, his cryptic warnings, and the palpable tension in the forest all fit together now. But knowing the truth didn't bring relief. If anything, it made the world feel bigger, darker, and far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. Back at her cabin, Amelia sank onto the couch, staring out the window at the forest. She tried to focus on something mundane, her half-unpacked boxes, the to-do list she'd written when she first moved in. But it was useless. Her mind kept replaying the events of the past few days, cycling through fear, curiosity, and an undeniable pull toward Ethan. She'd always been drawn to mysteries, and Ethan was the most compelling one she'd ever encountered. But this wasn't just a puzzle to solve. This was her life now, tangled up in a web of secrets and dangers she barely understood. "Why me?" she thought, echoing the question she'd asked Ethan earlier. Why had she been drawn to Moonridge? And why did she feel such an unshakable connection to him? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Her heart leaped, and for a brief moment, she thought it might be Ethan. When she opened the door, she was surprised to see Jenna standing there, a concerned look on her face. "Hey," Jenna said, holding up a bottle of wine. "You looked a little frazzled earlier, so I thought I'd swing by. Hope you don't mind." Amelia forced a smile, stepping aside to let her in. "Not at all. Thanks." Jenna set the wine on the counter and grabbed 2 glasses. "You okay? You seemed pretty shaken up when you left the cafe yesterday." Amelia hesitated. How could she explain what she was going through without sounding insane? "It's just a lot to adjust to," she said finally. "This place is different from what I'm used to." Jenna nodded, pouring the wine. "It's definitely not the city. But you'll get used to it. Moonridge has a way of growing on you." As they talked, Amelia found herself relaxing, grateful for the distraction. Jenna was easy to talk to, and her warmth was a welcome balm to Amelia's frayed nerves. But even as they laughed over stories about Jenna's mishaps with tourists, a part of Amelia's mind remained fixated on Ethan and the secrets he had revealed. Later that night, long after Jenna had left, Amelia sat on the porch, sipping the last of the wine. The forest stretched before her, dark and silent, its mysteries hidden in the shadows. She thought about Ethan, his strength, his intensity, and the vulnerability he'd shown when he admitted he didn't have all the answers. Amelia's feelings for him were complicated, a mix of fascination, fear, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. But as much as she wanted to understand him, she couldn't ignore the danger that seemed to follow him like a shadow. The next morning, Amelia decided to confront her fears head-on. She grabbed her boots and headed into the woods, determined to face the place that had become both a source of wonder and terror. The forest was quiet as she walked, the sunlight filtering through the leaves in golden beams. She followed the trail that led to the clearing where she'd seen the men by the fire, her heart pounding with every step. When she reached the spot, she stopped, her breath catching. The clearing was empty, but the fire ring remained, its stones blackened and charred. Amelia crouched down, running her fingers over the ash. Whoever those men were, they'd left in a hurry, but not before leaving traces of their presence. "You shouldn't be here." The voice startled her, and she spun around to see Ethan standing a few feet away, his expression a mix of frustration and concern. "Do you always sneak up on people?" she asked, trying to mask her surprise. Ethan crossed his arms, his gaze steady. "Only when they're somewhere they shouldn't be." Amelia straightened, meeting his eyes. "I needed to see it again. To understand." Ethan sighed, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "I get that. But this isn't the way." He stepped closer, his voice softening. "You're putting yourself in danger, Amelia. Those men, they're not like me. They won't hesitate to hurt you if they think you're a threat." She swallowed hard, her resolve wavering. "What do they want?" Ethan hesitated, then said, "Territory. Power. Control. They think they can take what doesn't belong to them." "And what about you?" she asked. "What are you fighting for?" His eyes softened, and for a moment, she saw the weight he carried, the burden of protecting his pack and the people of Moonridge. "I'm fighting to keep the peace. To protect the people I care about." Amelia felt a pang in her chest, a mix of admiration and something deeper. "You can't do it alone," she said quietly. Ethan gave a faint smile. "No, I can't. But I won't drag you into this, Amelia. It's not your fight." She stepped closer, her voice firm. "Maybe it's not. But I'm already in the middle of it, whether I like it or not. And I'm not going to just stand by while people are in danger." Ethan's gaze held hers, a flicker of something unreadable passing over his face. "You're braver than you realize," he said finally. Amelia's cheeks warmed, but she refused to look away. "I don't know about that. I'm just trying to make sense of all this." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "I'll help you. But you have to promise me something." "What?" "Stay close to me. If anything happens, if you're ever in danger, call for me. No matter where you are, I'll find you." His words sent a shiver down her spine, both comforting and unsettling. She nodded, her voice steady. "I promise." Ethan's lips quirked into a small smile, but his eyes remained serious. "Good. Now, let's get out of here. We've stayed in this clearing long enough." As they walked back toward the trail, Amelia felt a strange sense of relief. She didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, she didn't feel alone. Ethan was her tether to this new and terrifying world, and though the path ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let fear hold her back. Chapter 7. The Alpha's Mate. The next few days blurred into a mix of cautious curiosity and growing tension. Amelia couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, his confession, warnings, and the undeniable connection she felt whenever they were near. It wasn't just fascination anymore. It was something deeper, more instinctive, as though her very being was drawn to his. But with those feelings came questions she couldn't ignore. What did Ethan mean when he said she was tied to this world? Why had the wolf saved her that night, and what did it mean for her future in Moonridge? Amelia wanted answers, but wasn't sure if she was ready for the truth. One crisp morning, Amelia decided to walk through the forest trail near her cabin. The sunlight filtered through the trees in golden beams, and the scent of pine filled the air. She hoped the fresh air would clear her head, but her thoughts circled back to Ethan. The quiet was broken by the sound of footsteps behind her. Amelia turned, her pulse quickening, but she relaxed when she saw Ethan approaching. "Do you always stalk people in the woods?" she teased, though her heart raced at the sight of him. He smirked, his green eyes glinting in the sunlight. "Only when they look like they're about to wander too far." She crossed her arms, trying to mask her nervousness. "What are you doing out here?" "I was looking for you," he admitted, his tone serious. "We need to talk." Amelia's breath caught. She nodded and gestured for him to join her on the trail. They walked in silence for a while, the sounds of the forest filling the space between them. Finally, Ethan stopped and turned to face her. "There's something I haven't told you yet," he said, his expression grave. Her stomach tightened. "What is it?" He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "In my world, there's something called a mate bond. It's more than just a connection. It's a link, forged by instinct and fate. When a shifter finds their mate, it's unbreakable. It's like finding the other half of your soul." Amelia's heart thudded in her chest. "What does that have to do with me?" Ethan's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw vulnerability in his eyes. "When I saw you for the first time, I felt it. The bond. I didn't want to believe it. I tried to fight it, but it's there. You're my mate, Amelia." The words hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her speechless. She took a step back, trying to process what he'd just said. That doesn't make any sense," she stammered. "I'm not a shifter. I'm just me." Ethan stepped closer, his presence calming but intense. "It doesn't matter. The bond doesn't follow rules. It just is. And whether we like it or not, it's real." Amelia shook her head, her mind racing. "But I don't feel. I mean, how do you even know? What if it's just—" "You feel it," Ethan interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "I can see it in your eyes. The way you're drawn to me. The way you can't walk away, even when you're scared." She opened her mouth to protest, but the words caught in her throat. He was right. As much as she wanted to deny it, she did feel something, a pull, an ache, a need that she couldn't explain. "But what does this mean?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan hesitated, then said, "It means we're connected, whether we like it or not. But it also means you're in danger." Her pulse quickened. "Danger from who?" "From the rival pack," he said, his expression darkening. "They know about you and they'll see you as a weakness, a way to get to me. That's why I need you to trust me, Amelia. I'll do everything I can to keep you safe, but you have to stay close. No more wandering into the woods alone." Amelia's mind reeled as she tried to process everything. She wanted to argue, to tell him she didn't need his protection, but deep down, she knew he was right. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll stay close." Ethan nodded, relief flickering across his face. "Thank you." Over the next few days, Ethan kept his word. He stayed close, escorting Amelia on her walks and keeping watch over her cabin at night. His presence was both comforting and overwhelming, a constant reminder of the bond that tied them together. Amelia found herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain. His strength, his protectiveness, the way his green eyes softened when he looked at her, it was impossible to ignore. But with that connection came fear. What did being Ethan's mate mean for her future? Could she ever truly be part of his world? Or was she destined to remain an outsider? One evening, as they sat by the fire pit outside her cabin, Amelia finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her. "Ethan," she said, her voice tentative. He glanced at her, his expression softening. "What is it? What happens now? To us?" Ethan's jaw tightened, and he stared into the flames for a long moment before answering. "That depends on you," he said finally. "The bond is there, but it only works if we both accept it. If you choose to walk away, I won't stop you. But if you stay, things will change. You'll be part of my world, my pack, my mate." Amelia's heart ached at the sincerity in his voice. He was giving her a choice, even though she could see how much it pained him. She took a deep breath, her gaze meeting his. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," she admitted. But I'm willing to try. I don't want to walk away, Ethan. His eyes softened, and a faint smile tugged at his lips. Then we'll take it one step at a time. Amelia nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of fear and hope. For better or worse, her life had changed forever. And though the path ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't facing it alone. Chapter 8. Danger from Within. Amelia awoke to a loud knock at her cabin door. It was early, far too early for anyone to visit, but the sound's urgency jolted her out of bed. She grabbed a sweater and made her way to the door, her heart racing. When she opened it, Ethan stood on her porch, his expression tense. His green eyes scanned her face, as if confirming she was okay. "Get dressed," he said, his voice clipped. "We need to talk." "What's going on?" she asked, her stomach tightening at the seriousness in his tone. "Trouble," he said simply. "Meet me outside in 5 minutes." Before she could respond, he turned and walked off, disappearing into the tree line. Amelia dressed quickly, her mind racing with questions. Ethan's abrupt arrival was unsettling, and the tension in his voice sent alarm bells ringing in her head. When she stepped outside, he was waiting for her near the fire pit, his posture rigid. "What's going on?" she asked, crossing her arms to ward off the morning chill. Ethan hesitated, his jaw tightening. "There's been a problem in the pack," he said finally. "Someone's been talking to the rival pack, the men you saw in the woods." Amelia's stomach dropped. "Talking to them? You mean betraying you?" He nodded grimly. "We don't know who yet, but they've been feeding the other pack information. That's how they knew about you." Her breath caught. "Me? Why would they care about me?" Ethan's eyes softened, but his voice remained serious. "Because you're my mate, Amelia. That makes you a target. They think they can use you to get to me, to weaken me." Amelia's pulse quickened. The idea of being at the center of a pack conflict was terrifying, but the thought of someone within Ethan's own ranks betraying him was even worse. "Do you have any idea who it is?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. But I'm working on it. Until I figure it out, I need you to be careful. Don't trust anyone except me." Amelia nodded, her heart pounding. "What can I do to help?" His expression softened, a flicker of appreciation in his eyes. "Stay safe. Stay close to me. That's enough." The next few days were tense. Ethan's protective instincts went into overdrive, and Amelia found herself constantly under his watchful eye. She tried to keep her routine as normal as possible, but the sense of danger hung heavy over her like a storm cloud. At the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. It wasn't Ethan, his presence was comforting, not invasive, but someone else. A shadow that lingered just out of sight. One evening, as she returned from a walk into town, that feeling intensified. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the path that led to her cabin. Amelia quickened her pace, glancing over her shoulder every few steps. She was halfway to the cabin when she heard it, a rustling in the underbrush. She froze, her heart pounding in her ears. "Hello," she called, her voice trembling. There was no response, only the sound of footsteps approaching. Amelia's breath caught as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, his dark hair disheveled and his eyes cold. She recognized him instantly, one of the men from the clearing that night. Well, he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Look who's all alone in the woods." Amelia's mind raced. She turned to run, but before she could take a step, he lunged, grabbing her arm. "Let go of me," she yelled, struggling against his grip. But he was strong, unnaturally strong. "Don't bother fighting," he sneered. "We just want to have a little chat." "About your boyfriend." Amelia's blood ran cold. She tried to wrench herself free, but he held her tightly, his grip bruising. "Let her go." The voice came from behind them, low and menacing. Amelia's captor froze, his head whipping around. Ethan stood a few feet away, his expression dark and dangerous. "I won't say it again," Ethan growled, his green eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The man hesitated, his grip on Amelia loosening. Then he shoved her away and turned to face Ethan, a sneer twisting his lips. This isn't over, Blackwell, he spat before retreating into the shadows. Ethan was by Amelia's side in an instant, his hands on her shoulders as he checked her for injuries. Are you okay? He asked, his voice soft but urgent. She nodded, though her hands were shaking. I'm fine. Just shaken up. Ethan's jaw tightened, and his gaze flicked to the spot where the man had disappeared. He's one of them. A scout. What did he want? Amelia asked, her voice unsteady. Ethan's eyes darkened. To send a message. They're trying to scare us, to make us doubt each other. But it won't work. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. The encounter replayed in her mind, the man's cold eyes and cruel words etched into her memory. Ethan stayed with her, sitting in a chair by the window, his presence a steady reassurance. You don't have to do this, she said softly, breaking the silence. You don't have to protect me. He turned to her, his expression firm. Yes, I do. You're my mate, Amelia. That means you're my responsibility. She shook her head. I don't want to be a burden. You're not, he said, his voice gentle but unwavering. You're my strength. Her breath hitched at the intensity in his gaze, and for a moment, the danger surrounding them faded into the background. In that moment, Amelia realized that no matter how terrifying this new world was, she wasn't alone. Ethan was with her, and they would face whatever came their way together. Chapter 9. Betrayal in the Pack. The next morning, Amelia awoke to the sound of voices outside her cabin. She glanced toward the window and saw Ethan standing near the edge of the woods with two other men. Their postures were tense, their words too hushed to hear, but the mood was unmistakably serious. Amelia quickly dressed and stepped outside, the crisp morning air nipping at her skin. As she approached, the conversation fell silent, and the men turned to look at her. One was tall and broad, with short, sandy hair and a scar running across his jaw. His piercing blue eyes studied her with suspicion. The other was leaner, his dark hair slicked back and his expression unreadable. This is her, the taller man asked, his voice gruff. Ethan shot him a warning look. Amelia, this is Lucas and Dane. They're part of my pack. Amelia nodded, trying not to let their intense scrutiny unnerve her. Hi. Lucas gave her a curt nod, but Dane's lips curved into a faint smile. So you're the one causing all the fuss, he said, his tone light but edged with something she couldn't place. Ethan stepped closer to her, his presence protective. She's not causing anything. The rival pack is stirring trouble, and she's caught in the middle. Because she's your mate, Lucas said bluntly. That's the problem, Ethan. They're using her against you. Amelia's stomach tightened at his words, but Ethan didn't waver. She's not the problem, he said firmly. The traitor in our pack is... Lucas's expression darkened. If there's a traitor, we'll find them. But bringing a human into this... She's not just a human, Ethan snapped, his voice low and dangerous. She's my mate. And she's not going anywhere. The tension between them was palpable, and Amelia felt a surge of guilt. She hadn't asked to be part of this, but now it seemed like her presence was driving a wedge between Ethan and his pack. Dane raised a hand, his tone calm. Let's all take a breath. Fighting among ourselves won't help. He glanced at Amelia, his dark eyes thoughtful. The rival pack will keep coming as long as they think she's a weakness. We need to turn the tables. What are you suggesting? Ethan asked, his tone wary. Dane shrugged. We let them think they're winning. Use her as bait to draw them out. No, Ethan said instantly, his voice hard as steel. Absolutely not. It's risky, Dane admitted, but it could work. They're not expecting her to fight back. She's not fighting anything, Ethan growled. I won't put her in harm's way. Amelia's heart pounded, but she forced herself to speak. What if he's right? Ethan turned to her, his green eyes blazing. Amelia, no. I won't allow it. She stepped closer, meeting his gaze. I'm already in danger just by being here. If this can help end it, shouldn't we at least consider it? Lucas crossed his arms. It's a bad idea. She's not one of us. She doesn't have the instincts or the training. Then train me, Amelia said, cutting him off. The words surprised even her, but once they were out, she felt a strange sense of resolve. If she was going to be part of this world, she needed to stop being a liability. Ethan's expression softened, but his voice remained firm. "This isn't your fight, Amelia." "It is now," she said quietly. Later that day, Ethan and Amelia sat on the porch of her cabin, the tension between them thick. "I don't like this," he said, his tone clipped. "I know," she replied. "But I can't just sit around waiting for someone to attack me. If there's something I can do to help, I want to do it." Ethan rubbed a hand over his face, frustration evident in his posture. "You don't understand what you're asking. The rival pack, they don't fight fair. They don't care about rules or honor. If you get caught in the middle—" "I trust you to protect me," Amelia said, her voice steady. "But I also trust myself to learn." Her words seemed to catch him off guard, and for a moment, he just looked at her, his green eyes searching hers. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh. "Fine," he said. "But we do this my way. No unnecessary risks." Amelia nodded, relief washing over her. "Deal." Over the next few days, Ethan began teaching Amelia the basics of self-defense. They worked in the clearing near her cabin, where the trees provided both privacy and shade. Ethan was a patient teacher, but he didn't go easy on her. He showed her how to throw punches, how to break free from holds, and how to use her smaller size to her advantage. "You're faster than they are," he said during one session. "Use that. Stay on your feet, and don't let them corner you." Amelia absorbed everything he taught her, determined to prove she wasn't a liability. Each day, she grew stronger and more confident, but she couldn't ignore the shadow of doubt that lingered in the back of her mind. One evening, as they finished a training session, Dane appeared at the edge of the clearing. "We've got a lead," he said, his tone urgent. Ethan straightened. "What kind of lead?" Dane hesitated, glancing at Amelia before speaking. "Lucas found something. A meeting place the rival pack's been using. He thinks the traitor might show up there tonight." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Where is it?" "Near the old quarry," Dane said. "He's already on his way." Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. The idea of a traitor among Ethan's pack was bad enough, but the thought of confronting them head-on was terrifying. "I'm coming with you," Ethan said, his voice firm. Dane nodded. "We'll need all the help we can get." Ethan turned to Amelia, his expression softening. "Stay here. I mean it, Amelia. This is too dangerous." She wanted to argue, but the seriousness in his voice stopped her. "Be careful," she said instead. Ethan gave her a faint smile. "Always." As he and Dane disappeared into the trees, Amelia's heart ached with worry. She could only hope that whatever they found at the quarry would bring them closer to ending the threat and uncovering the traitor in their midst. Chapter 10. The Call of the Wild. The hours stretched endlessly as Amelia waited for Ethan to return. The cabin, normally her haven, felt like a prison as worry clawed at her. She had tried distracting herself with small tasks, organizing her books, making tea, but nothing could stop her thoughts from spiraling. What if something went wrong? What if Ethan didn't come back? The forest seemed unnaturally quiet, the usual chorus of birds and insects replaced by a tense, oppressive silence. Every creak of the cabin or rustle of leaves outside made her jump, her nerves fraying with each passing minute. Finally, just as the sky began to darken, Amelia heard footsteps approaching. She rushed to the door, relief flooding her when she saw Ethan stepping out of the shadows. But the relief was short-lived. Ethan's face was grim, his green eyes shadowed with exhaustion. A faint smear of blood streaked his jaw, though he didn't appear injured. Behind him, Dane emerged, his expression equally troubled. "What happened?" Amelia asked, her voice trembling. Ethan hesitated, then gestured for her to step aside. "We need to talk." Inside the cabin, Ethan and Dane sat across from Amelia, their postures tense. "We found the meeting place," Ethan began. "Lucas was already there when we arrived. The rival pack didn't show up, but we found evidence that someone's been passing information to them." "What kind of evidence?" Amelia asked, her stomach tightening. Dane leaned forward, his dark eyes narrowing. "They had details about the pack's movements, Things only an insider would know. Someone's been feeding them intel. Amelia's mind raced. Did you find out who? Ethan shook his head, frustration etched into his features.
No.
But it narrows the list. Whoever it is, they're dangerous, and they're putting everyone at risk. Amelia swallowed hard, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her. What do we do now? Ethan's gaze softened as he looked at her. We stay vigilant, and we keep you safe. The following days were a blur of heightened security and unease. Ethan and Dane doubled their patrols, while Amelia spent most of her time at the cabin under Ethan's watchful eye. The tension in the air was palpable, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Despite the danger, Amelia couldn't ignore the growing bond between her and Ethan. He was a constant presence, steady, protective, and fiercely devoted to her safety. Their training sessions continued, but they had taken on a new intensity, as though Ethan was preparing her for something he couldn't bring himself to say aloud. One evening, as they stood in the clearing, Ethan handed her a small blade. What's this for? Amelia asked, staring at the weapon in her hand. Protection, he said simply. Her stomach churned. You think it's going to come to that? Ethan hesitated, then nodded. I hope not. But I'd rather you have it and not need it than the other way around. Amelia swallowed hard, gripping the blade tightly. The weight of it was both comforting and terrifying. That night, Amelia dreamed again. She was in the forest, running barefoot beneath the moonlight. The trees blurred around her, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and her heart pounded with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Ahead of her, golden eyes glimmered in the darkness. The massive wolf stood still, its gaze locked onto hers. Why are you here? She whispered, her voice trembling. The wolf didn't answer, but its eyes seemed to speak volumes. There was something familiar, almost human, in its gaze, a connection that made her chest ache. The howl that pierced the air was low and mournful, sending a shiver down her spine. She woke with a start, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The dream lingered in her mind, vivid and unsettling. As she sat up, she noticed Ethan standing by the window, his silhouette illuminated by the pale moonlight. You're awake, he said softly, turning to face her. Amelia nodded, brushing a hand through her hair. Another dream, she murmured. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, his green eyes searching hers. The wolf. She nodded again, her voice barely above a whisper. It feels so real, like it's trying to tell me something. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Do you think it means something? She asked, her voice trembling. He hesitated, then reached out to take her hand. The bond between mates is strong, stronger than most people realize. It's possible your dreams are connected to that. Amelia's heart ached at the sincerity in his voice. She wanted to ask more, to understand the depth of the connection between them, but before she could speak, a howl echoed through the night. Ethan tensed, his eyes snapping to the window. What is it? Amelia whispered, her pulse quickening. Stay here, he said, standing abruptly. No, she said, grabbing his arm. I'm not staying behind while you. Amelia, he said firmly, his gaze locking onto hers. I need you to trust me. Please. She swallowed hard, her heart pounding. Be careful. He nodded, his hand lingering on hers for a brief moment before he disappeared into the night. The forest was alive with tension as Ethan moved through the trees, his senses heightened. The howl had come from the north, near the edge of their territory. It wasn't one of his pack, that much was certain. As he approached the clearing, he caught a familiar scent. His heart sank. Lucas stood in the center of the clearing, his posture rigid. Beside him were two men from the rival pack, their expressions smug. Lucas, Ethan growled, his voice low and dangerous. What are you doing? Lucas turned to face him, his blue eyes cold. What I have to do? You're the traitor, Ethan said, his chest tightening. Lucas smirked. I prefer survivor. Your leadership has made us weak, Ethan. It's time for a change. Ethan's wolf surged beneath his skin, but he held it back. "You're putting the entire pack at risk." "The pack will be fine," Lucas said. "Once you're out of the picture." Ethan's lips curled into a snarl. "You're making a mistake." Lucas's expression hardened. "We'll see about that." Before Ethan could respond, the rival wolves lunged, their forms shifting midair. Ethan braced himself, his own transformation ripping through him as he prepared for the fight of his life. Back at the cabin, Amelia stared out the window, her hand clutching the blade Ethan had given her. She didn't know what was happening in the forest, but she could feel it, a sense of urgency, of danger. The bond between her and Ethan pulsed like a living thing, and in that moment, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever was happening out there, it wasn't over yet. Chapter 11. The Full Moon Confrontation. The howl that shattered the night still echoed in Amelia's ears as she paced the cabin. Every passing second without a word from Ethan felt like an eternity, her anxiety mounting with each moment of silence. She clutched the blade he had given her, the cold metal grounding her as her thoughts spiraled. Her instincts screamed at her to stay inside, as Ethan had ordered, but something stronger tugged at her, a primal pull, a tether she couldn't ignore. The bond. She could feel it more intensely than ever, humming in her chest like an unspoken call. Ethan was in danger. She didn't know how she knew, but she did, and the knowledge propelled her to her feet. Grabbing a flashlight, she shoved open the door and stepped into the forest. The woods were darker than she had ever seen, the full moon veiled by heavy clouds. Shadows stretched across the ground like claws, and the wind whispered through the trees almost mournfully. Amelia moved quickly, her steps guided by memory and instinct. The clearing, where Ethan had gone, was etched into her mind like a beacon. She followed the faint sounds of snarls and growls that echoed through the trees, each one making her heart pound harder. When she reached the edge of the clearing, she froze. The scene before her was chaos. Ethan, in his wolf form, was locked in a vicious battle with two rival shifters. His silver fur glinted in the moonlight, and his green eyes burned with feral intensity. The other wolves were larger, their dark forms bristling with power, but Ethan fought with a ferocity that left no doubt he was the alpha. Lucas stood nearby in his human form, watching the fight with cold detachment. He didn't seem surprised to see her, his blue eyes narrowing as they met hers. "Well, if it isn't the mate," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Amelia tightened her grip on the blade, her instinct screaming at her to run, but she refused to back down. "You're betraying your pack," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "How could you do this?" Lucas sneered. "You wouldn't understand. The pack is weak under Ethan's rule. He lets emotions cloud his judgment. A true alpha would never let a human jeopardize everything we've built." Amelia's chest tightened with anger and fear. "You're risking their lives for power. That doesn't make you an alpha. It makes you a coward." Lucas's eyes flashed with fury, and he took a step toward her. "You don't belong here," he snarled. "You're a distraction. And distractions get people killed." Before she could react, Lucas lunged at her. Amelia's instincts took over. She sidestepped his attack, the blade in her hand slicing through the air. Lucas let out a sharp cry as the knife grazed his arm, but the wound only seemed to fuel his rage. He moved quickly, his strength and speed far beyond human, and Amelia struggled to keep up. Each time he struck, she barely managed to evade him, the adrenaline coursing through her, keeping her one step ahead. The sounds of the fight between the wolves grew louder, and out of the corner of her eye, she saw Ethan throw one of his opponents to the ground with a savage growl. The other wolf lunged at him, but Ethan turned just in time, his powerful jaws snapping inches from his rival's throat. Amelia's distraction cost her. Lucas's hand closed around her wrist, wrenching the blade from her grasp. He shoved her backward, and she stumbled, falling hard against the ground. "You're pathetic," Lucas sneered, standing over her. "Ethan will fall, and when he does, so will you." Amelia's heart pounded as she scrambled to her feet, her eyes darting toward Ethan. He was still locked in battle, his attention fully consumed by his opponents. But then something incredible happened. The bond, the connection between her and Ethan, flared to life, stronger than ever. It was as if she could feel his presence, his strength, and his determination. And she knew, without a doubt, that he could feel hers too. "Ethan," she cried, her voice cutting through the chaos. His head snapped toward her, his green eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, everything else faded. The rival wolves, the traitor, the danger. There was only the bond, pulsing between them like a heartbeat. And then Ethan moved. With a ferocious snarl, he dispatched his final opponent, his powerful form leaping toward Lucas in a blur of silver. Lucas turned, his expression twisting with shock as Ethan slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. Ethan's jaws closed around Lucas's throat, his growl low and menacing. For a moment, the clearing was silent, the tension thick as Ethan loomed over the traitor. But instead of delivering the killing blow, Ethan released him. Lucas gasped for air, his hands clutching at his neck as he scrambled backward. "You're weak," he spat, his voice hoarse. Ethan shifted back into his human form, his expression cold and unyielding. "Weakness would be killing you and proving them right," he said, his voice like steel. "You're banished, Lucas. If I see you in my territory again, I won't hesitate." Lucas glared at him, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. Without another word, he turned and fled into the shadows. Amelia stood frozen, her heart racing as Ethan approached her. His green eyes softened as he reached out, his hand brushing against her cheek. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and full of concern. She nodded, though her legs still felt shaky. "I think so." Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I told you to stay in the cabin," he murmured, but there was no anger in his tone. Only relief. "I couldn't," she whispered. "I felt. I knew you needed me." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "I did. You saved me, Amelia. More than you realize." As the tension in the clearing began to fade, Amelia realized something profound. The bond between her and Ethan wasn't just a connection. It was a source of strength, uniting them in a way she could never have imagined. And though the battle was over, she knew their fight wasn't finished. The rival pack was still out there, and the dangers of this world were far from gone. But for now, as Ethan's arms wrapped around her and the moonlight bathed the forest, she felt a rare and precious sense of peace. They had survived the night. Together. Chapter 12. Shattered but Unbroken. The clearing was silent after the chaos, the air heavy with the aftermath of battle. Amelia stood at the edge, her body trembling from the rush of adrenaline and the weight of what had just occurred. Ethan's arms around her were the only thing grounding her as the reality of the confrontation with Lucas and the rival wolves sank in. "We need to get back to the cabin," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. His eyes scanned the forest, ever watchful for any lingering threats. Amelia nodded, her throat tight. She felt exposed, as though the shadows between the trees were still watching her, waiting for an opportunity to strike. When they returned to the cabin, Ethan wasted no time securing the area. He checked the locks on the doors and windows, his movements swift and precise. Dane arrived shortly after, his face grim as he carried news of the rival wolves retreating deeper into the forest. "Lucas won't stop," Dane warned, leaning against the kitchen counter. "You humiliated him in front of them. He'll be back, and he'll be worse next time." Ethan's jaw tightened, his expression hard. "Let him try. He knows what's waiting for him if he does." Amelia sat quietly at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea Ethan had made for her. The heat seeped into her palms, but it did little to chase away the cold that had settled in her chest. She had fought back tonight, had faced danger head-on, but the fear of what could have happened still lingered. "This isn't over, is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's gaze softened as he looked at her. "No," he admitted, "but we'll be ready." Later that night, after Dane left to rejoin the pack, Amelia sat on the couch while Ethan stoked the fire. The flames cast flickering shadows across the room, their warmth a stark contrast to the tension that still hung in the air. "You could have killed him," Amelia said suddenly, breaking the silence. Ethan paused, his back to her. "I could have," he agreed. "But killing him wouldn't have solved anything. It would have made me no better than him." She studied him, her heart aching at the weight he carried. "You're not like him, Ethan. You're a leader, and a good one." He turned to face her, his green eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and regret. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough. If I'm making the right choices for the pack, for you?" Amelia stood, crossing the room to stand in front of him. "You are," she said firmly. "You saved me tonight, Ethan. And you saved your pack by showing them what real strength looks like." For a moment, he didn't respond. Then he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I don't know what I'd do if something happened to you," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "You don't have to worry about that," she said, her hand covering his. "We're in this together, remember?" Ethan's lips quirked into a faint smile, and he pulled her into his arms. For the first time that night, Amelia felt a sense of calm. The following days were tense but quiet. Ethan increased the pack's patrols, and Amelia spent her time honing the skills he had taught her. She was determined not to be a liability, and though she still had much to learn, she refused to back down. But the peace was short-lived. One evening, as Amelia sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan approached her, his expression troubled. "We need to talk," he said, sitting beside her. She turned to him, her heart sinking at the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" He hesitated, then said, "The rival pack isn't just after me. They're after you too." Amelia's stomach twisted. "Me? Why?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "Because you're my mate. To them, that makes you a symbol of my weakness. They think if they can take you, they can break me." The words hit her like a blow, but she forced herself to stay calm. "What do we do?" "We stay vigilant," he said, his green eyes burning with determination. "I'll protect you, Amelia. No matter what." "I know you will," she said softly, placing her hand over his. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest grew darker, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. That night, as she lay in bed, the dreams returned. She was running through the forest again, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The moonlight lit her path, but the shadows seemed to move with her, their presence suffocating. Ahead of her, the golden-eyed wolf waited. "Help me," she whispered, her voice trembling. The wolf's gaze was steady, its presence both comforting and commanding. Then, without warning, it threw back its head and howled, the sound piercing the night like a battle cry. Amelia woke with a start, her heart racing. The bond pulsed in her chest, stronger than ever, and she knew with absolute certainty, that the fight wasn't over. She glanced at Ethan, who slept soundly beside her, his face relaxed for the first time in days. For his sake, and for the pack, she would fight. No matter what came next, she wouldn't let the rival wolves tear them apart. Chapter 13. The pack's fight for survival. Amelia awoke the morning after her dream with a sense of urgency humming in her chest. The connection she shared with Ethan was stronger than ever, and it was growing harder to ignore the nagging feeling that something was about to happen, something big. Ethan was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with Dane. A map of the surrounding forest was spread between them, dotted with markers and scribbled notes. Their low voices carried a tension that made Amelia's stomach tighten. "What's going on?" she asked, stepping into the room. Ethan glanced up, his expression softening when he saw her. "The rival pack is moving," he said. "We think they're planning an attack." Amelia's breath caught. "When?" Dane leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes sharp.
"Soon.
"Maybe tonight. They've been testing our boundaries for weeks, but this feels different. They're not just posturing anymore. They're preparing for a fight." A chill ran down her spine. "What can I do to help?" Ethan shook his head. "You've done enough. I need you to stay here, where it's safe." "No," Amelia said firmly. "I'm not going to hide while you and the pack are out there risking your lives." Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could argue, Dane spoke. She's right, Ethan. She's part of this now, whether we like it or not. If the pack sees her standing with us, it'll send a message. To them and to the rival pack. Ethan's green eyes locked onto hers, a mix of frustration and admiration flickering in their depths. Finally, he nodded. All right. But you stay close to me. No heroics. Amelia nodded, her heart pounding. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of preparation. Ethan gathered the pack at the clearing near the cabin, the air buzzing with a mix of tension and determination. Amelia watched as the wolves, both in human and animal form, moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for the battle they all knew was coming. She could feel their loyalty to Ethan, their trust in his leadership, and it filled her with a fierce pride. Ethan addressed them as the sun began to set, his voice strong and steady. We've faced challenges before, he said, his green eyes sweeping over the group. And we've always come out stronger. This time will be no different. The rival pack thinks they can take what's ours, but they're wrong. This is our territory, our family. We protect what's ours. A collective growl rippled through the pack, their resolve palpable. Ethan's gaze found Amelia, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade away. We fight together, he said. As one. As night fell, the forest grew eerily quiet. The pack took their positions, spreading out along the territory's edge, while Ethan, Dane, and Amelia stayed in the clearing. Amelia's pulse raced as she clutched the blade Ethan had given her, her eyes scanning the shadows. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she refused to let fear take over. The first attack came swiftly. A dark-furred wolf lunged from the trees, its eyes glowing with malice. Ethan shifted in an instant, his powerful form colliding with the intruder in a blur of silver and black. The snarls and growls were deafening, the sheer force of their struggle shaking the ground beneath her feet. Before Amelia could process what was happening, more wolves emerged from the shadows, their presence a terrifying wave of movement and sound. The clearing erupted into chaos. Amelia fought to keep her focus as the battle raged around her. She stayed close to Ethan as promised, her blade flashing in the moonlight whenever a rival wolf came too close. Her training with Ethan had prepared her for this, but nothing could have prepared her for the raw intensity of the fight, the primal, unrelenting energy that coursed through the air. Dane fought nearby, his movements quick and precise, as he took down two wolves in rapid succession. The pack held their ground, their unity and strength a testament to Ethan's leadership. But the rival wolves were relentless, their numbers greater than expected. Amelia's breath hitched as a large wolf charged toward her, its yellow eyes locked onto hers. She braced herself, her grip on the blade tightening, but before the wolf could reach her, Ethan appeared, his silver form slamming into it with bone-crushing force. The wolf yelped in pain as Ethan pinned it to the ground, his teeth bared in a ferocious snarl. Amelia watched in awe as he fought, every movement precise and powerful. The battle raged on, but as the hours passed, the tide began to turn. The rival wolves' initial surge of aggression faltered under the pack's resilience, their attacks growing more disorganized. Finally, as dawn began to break, the remaining rival wolves retreated, their howls of defeat echoing through the forest. Ethan stood in the clearing, his silver fur streaked with blood but his stance unyielding. One by one, the members of his pack emerged from the shadows, their expressions weary but triumphant. Amelia's knees buckled with relief as she realized it was over. Ethan shifted back to his human form and crossed the clearing to her, his green eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hands cupping her face. She nodded, her throat tight. "I'm fine. Are you?" He smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "I've had worse." Dane approached, a satisfied grin on his face. "They won't be back anytime soon," he said. "We sent them a message they won't forget." Ethan nodded, his gaze lingering on Amelia. "We did this together," he said softly. Amelia felt a surge of pride and gratitude. She had faced her fears, fought alongside the pack, and come out stronger. As the sun rose over the forest, casting its golden light on the clearing, Amelia knew one thing for certain. She belonged here. With Ethan. With the pack. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Chapter 14. Love Forged in Fire. The sun rose above Moonridge, casting warm golden light across the forest. For the first time in weeks, the tension that had blanketed the pack seemed to lift. The rival wolves had been defeated, and though the threat wasn't entirely gone, their retreat marked a hard-won victory. Amelia stood on the porch of her cabin, gazing out at the woods. The events of the battle still played vividly in her mind. Lucas's betrayal, Ethan's fierce determination, the raw intensity of the fight. She had seen a side of herself she never knew existed, strong, resilient, and willing to fight for the people she loved. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She turned to see Ethan approaching, his green eyes soft and warm despite the exhaustion etched into his features. "Good morning," he said, his voice low and steady. "Morning," she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. He joined her on the porch, leaning against the railing. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the quiet between them filled with unspoken emotions. "You were incredible last night," Ethan said finally, his gaze fixed on hers. Amelia laughed softly, shaking her head. "I was terrified. But you didn't let it stop you," he said, his tone full of admiration. "You stood your ground, fought for what you believed in. That takes courage." Her cheeks warmed at his words, but she didn't look away. "I had a good teacher," she said, her voice soft. Ethan smiled, a rare, genuine expression that made her heart ache. "You had it in you all along. I just helped you see it." They spent the morning walking through the forest, checking on the pack and assessing the damage from the battle. Ethan's leadership was evident in every interaction, his calm authority, his unwavering commitment to their safety. Amelia watched him with a mix of awe and affection. He wasn't just strong and capable, he was kind, thoughtful, and deeply devoted to the people he cared about. As they returned to the cabin, Ethan stopped suddenly, his hand brushing hers. "There's something I need to say," he said, his voice low. Amelia's heart quickened as she turned to face him. "What is it?" He hesitated, his green eyes searching hers. "Last night, when I saw you out there, standing with us, I realized something." "What?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That I don't want to live in a world without you," he said, his tone steady and sincere. "You've changed everything for me, Amelia. You've made me stronger, better. I can't imagine my life without you in it." Tears welled in her eyes at his words, her chest tightening with emotion. "Ethan?" He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I know this hasn't been easy. I know this world is dangerous and complicated. But I promise you, I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. To make this work. If you'll stay with me." Amelia swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "Of course I'll stay," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're my home now, Ethan. Wherever you are, that's where I belong." A smile broke across his face, and before she could say another word, he pulled her into his arms, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was both fierce and tender. The rest of the day was a blur of joy and relief. The pack gathered at the clearing to celebrate their victory, the mood light and hopeful. For the first time in weeks, laughter echoed through the forest, and Amelia felt a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. Dane approached her at one point, a knowing grin on his face. "So, it's official now, huh?" he said, nodding toward Ethan. Amelia blushed but smiled. "I guess it is." "He's a lucky guy," Dane said, his tone sincere. "You've brought something out in him that none of us have seen in a long time. Don't let him forget it." "I won't," she promised. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in shades of orange and gold, Ethan found Amelia sitting by the fire pit. He took a seat beside her, his presence warm and steady. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice low. She turned to him, her eyes shining. "I've never been happier." He reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, the crackling of the fire and the rustle of the trees filling the air. Amelia leaned her head against his shoulder, a sense of peace washing over her. The danger wasn't gone, and the challenges they faced were far from over. But in that moment, surrounded by the pack and held by the man she loved, Amelia knew they could face anything, together. And as the first stars appeared in the night sky, she realized that their love, forged in fire and tested by trials, was unbreakable. Chapter 15. Together, forever under the moon. The following weeks were a mix of healing and rebuilding for the pack. The fight with the rival wolves had left scars, both physical and emotional, but it had also strengthened their unity. Ethan's leadership was more respected than ever, and the pack began to settle into a cautious but hopeful peace. Amelia had become an integral part of their lives. No longer just an outsider, she was treated as one of them, her bond with Ethan a symbol of strength and hope for the entire pack. She threw herself into learning more about their ways, her desire to be a true partner to Ethan driving her every action. But even in this newfound peace, Amelia couldn't ignore the changes stirring within her. One evening, as the full moon hung low in the sky, Amelia stood on the edge of the forest, her heart racing. Ethan approached her from behind, his step silent, but his presence unmistakable. "You've been quiet all day," he said softly, his green eyes watching her closely. "I've been thinking," she admitted, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "About everything that's happened. About us." Ethan stepped closer, his warmth enveloping her. "What about us?" She turned to face him, her chest tightening with emotion. "This world, your world, it's dangerous. It's not what I ever imagined for myself, but it feels like it's where I'm meant to be. Like I'm finally home." Ethan's expression softened, and he reached for her hand. "You're home. With me. With the pack. That will never change." Her lips curved into a small smile, but it quickly faltered. "I've been feeling different lately," she said hesitantly. "Ever since the bond started. I don't know how to explain it. Stronger, maybe. More connected. It's like the forest is alive in a way I've never felt before." Ethan's gaze grew serious. "The bond between mates is powerful," he said. "It can awaken parts of you that you didn't know were there. Especially if the connection runs deeper than blood." "What do you mean?" He hesitated, his hand tightening around hers. "I don't know for sure. But I think there's more to you, Amelia. More than either of us realized." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. "You think I might be like you?" Ethan's expression was a mix of hope and caution. "It's possible. The bond has a way of unlocking the truth. But whatever happens, it doesn't change who you are, or how much I love you." Her breath hitched at his words, and she stepped closer, wrapping her arms around him. "I love you too," she whispered. "No matter what." That night, the pack gathered under the full moon for a celebration. The clearing was alive with laughter and music, the tension of the past weeks replaced by a sense of hope and renewal. Amelia stood by the fire, watching as the pack danced and talked. Ethan was nearby, his presence a constant source of comfort. Dane approached her, a drink in hand and a mischievous grin on his face. "You're a natural, you know," he said. "A natural at what?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. "Fitting in," Dane replied. "You've got the pack wrapped around your finger. Even Ethan, especially Ethan." Amelia laughed softly. "I don't think he'd agree with you on that." "He would," Dane said, his tone more serious now. "You've changed him, Amelia. Made him better. And the pack sees it too. They're lucky to have you. We all are." Her chest tightened with emotion. "Thank you, Dane. That means a lot." He nodded, then raised his glass in a silent toast before disappearing into the crowd. As the evening wore on, Ethan found Amelia sitting on a log near the edge of the clearing, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the firelight. "Hey," he said, taking a seat beside her. "Hey," she replied, her lips curving into a smile. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the pack together. "They're happy," Amelia said softly. "They are," Ethan agreed. "Thanks to you." She shook her head. "This is your pack, Ethan. You're the reason they're safe. We did this together," he said, his voice full of conviction. I couldn't have done it without you. Amelia turned to him, her heart swelling with love. I still can't believe how much my life has changed. How much you've changed it. Ethan reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. You've changed mine too, Amelia. In more ways than I can say. As they gazed at each other, the bond between them pulsed like a living thing, stronger than ever. The full moon hung low in the sky, its light bathing the clearing in silver. Ethan stood, holding out his hand to her. Dance with me, he said, his green eyes shining. Amelia laughed softly, taking his hand. I didn't think you were the dancing type. For you, I'll make an exception, he said with a smile. They moved together under the moonlight, the sounds of the forest and the laughter of the pack blending into a symphony of life and love. In that moment, Amelia knew she had found her place, not just in the pack, but in Ethan's heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their bond unbreakable, their love as constant as the moonlight. And as the night stretched on, Amelia felt a peace she had never known, her heart full of hope for the future. She was home.